I knew it was over the moment Ryan Mercer couldn't look me in the eye. That smug little MBA import, fresh from some venture-backed incubator that probably taught empathy as an elective, sat across from me like he was assessing an obsolete asset. He smelled like citrus cologne and ambition. His first words weren't thank you or good morning, but let's talk about alignment. Alignment. After 25 years at Novacore Technologies, I'd built the architecture that made their product worth $500 million, and now I was being aligned right out the door. He flipped open my review folder like a waiter presenting a check and said, "Look, Olivia, you've done great work. Really, but you've been here a long time. We need people who are agile, adaptable. If you're not happy..." He smiled, that predator smile that never reached his eyes. The door's right there. I didn't feel anger or grief. What I felt was a stillness so deep, it hummed. My gaze drifted to the team photo on my desk. Those engineers I'd hired straight from college. The ones I'd pulled through crashes and midnight code deployments, who'd lived on vending machine coffee and microwave popcorn beside me. I remembered missing my brother's wedding because the load balancer failed during a rollout. I remembered fighting for them when the board wanted to outsource half the department to some faceless contractor. And now this boy was handing me a termination folder and a pep talk about agility. I closed my laptop. No shouting, no tears. I stood, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked out. Past my team, past the glass-walled conference room where executives pretended not to see, past the same HR rep who'd once asked me to mentor her niece. No one said a word. That silence had weight. It crushed loyalty, history, everything. But silence is a weapon if you know how to use it. I didn't go home right away. I went to the diner 2 blocks down, ordered a black coffee, and sat in a red vinyl booth, letting the quiet settle. Not rage, not panic, just breath. Novacore had been my life since 1999, back when we were working out of a rented office above a pawn shop and calling ourselves innovators. I'd watched us climb from a glitchy prototype to a $550 million powerhouse. And every line of the original core algorithm carried my fingerprints. I hadn't documented everything the way modern devs did. The code lived in me, not a manual. After 25 years, you stop needing comments. I paid my bill in cash, walked 3 blocks in the wrong direction just to feel movement again, then hailed an old yellow cab, felt more real than any app. Home smelled like cedar and old books. I set the folder on the dining table, poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, and opened the drawer I hadn't touched in years. Beneath tax returns and expired warranties lay a slim brown envelope. No label, just the weight of foresight. Inside, the original provisional patent for Novacore's flagship framework. My name, Olivia Grant, on the top line. Filed in 2008, during one of the company's chaotic funding cycles when legal was too busy keeping us solvent to notice the IP registry. A mentor, years ago, had told me to hold the provisional rights until things stabilize. They never did. For 17 years, Novacore had been licensing my framework under temporary agreements, contracts with expiration clauses and one quiet little sentence buried like a landmine. In the event of involuntary termination without cause, full reversion of rights shall trigger automatically within 24 hours. Signed, stamped, forgotten. Nobody ever thought I'd leave. Guess what, Ryan? You just pulled the pin. I set the envelope aside, the bourbon catching the kitchen light, and exhaled. This wasn't vengeance. Not yet. It was math. Cause and effect. I powered up my laptop, opened an encrypted email draft to an old friend, Nick Rollins, IP attorney turned Oregon rancher. Subject line, need you to confirm a clause. I attached a scan of the filing and typed 2 words. Still valid? Then hit send. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. My phone buzzed again. Another Slack message from HR asking me to complete my exit survey. I smiled. They had no idea the exit survey was about to go both ways. Nick called before sunrise, Oregon time. I picked up on the first ring. "Still valid," he said, his voice dry and unhurried. I could hear the faint clink of a mug, the rustle of paper, his version of a drum roll. "If they fired you yesterday, the reversion triggered the moment you walked out the door." I didn't speak. There was nothing to add. After a moment, he chuckled softly. "You actually kept that clause, Liv?" I smiled into my bourbon. Guess I did. When we hung up, I sat in the dim light of my kitchen for a long time, the sound of the refrigerator hum filling the room like background applause. The patent, my patent, had legally reverted to me overnight. No theatrics, no lawsuits, just a buried clause waking up after 17 years of dormancy. Novacore's empire was now balanced on a paper thread with my name on it. I moved like I'd rehearsed this all along. Logged into the USPTO filing portal, opened the encrypted folder Nick and I had built years ago. A just-in-case contingency we'd half-joked about when the company was still called NovaLogic. "You probably won't need this," he'd said back then, "but smart women don't bet on fairness." He was right. The reversion confirmation form was still there, neatly pre-filled with all the data. All I had to do was tick one box: involuntary termination without cause. I clicked submit. The progress bar crawled across the screen, then turned green. Ownership of Novacore's $550 million core algorithm officially slid back into my hands. I didn't cheer. I just leaned back in my chair and let silence do the celebrating. My cat, Figaro, hopped onto the counter, unimpressed. I sipped my coffee, checked the USPTO status. The update wouldn't go live instantly, but within hours, anyone doing a public lookup would see a new owner listed. Olivia Grant. Not Novacore Technologies, not the LLC, not the corporate entity. Just me. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes when you realize you've just flipped the kill switch on a system everyone else depends on. That morning, I stood at my window watching the skyline turn gold, holding the knowledge that an empire had just lost its foundation and didn't even know it yet. Across town, Novacore's new leadership team was probably sipping espresso, prepping their 10 o'clock a.m. product strategy meeting, the one where Ryan would perform his little routine about next-gen scalability. Meanwhile, the patent powering every promise in their investor deck now belonged to me. By 7, a confirmation email pinged from the USPTO. Change of ownership recorded. I stared at it for a moment, then opened a new document. Not a resume, not a rant, a licensing proposal. If they wanted to keep using my algorithm, they'd pay for it. Market rate plus penalties. I wasn't burning the bridge. I was installing a toll booth. Around 11 knock, I got a call from Marcy, one of my old engineers. She sounded hesitant, the way people do when they suspect the ship's sinking. "Hey, Liv, just a heads up. We're migrating your old code into the next-gen build this week. Kind of weird without you here." I let the silence stretch, then said evenly, "Good luck with that." She paused. "Wait, what do you mean?" Click. They'd learned soon enough. See, I never shouted. I never sued. I preferred rope, the slow, tightening kind. And by noon, that rope had already looped around Novacore's legal department. The reversion notice would have landed in their inbox by then, automatically forwarded from the Federal Registry. But companies like Novacore don't read those alerts unless someone above their pay grade tells them to. And Ryan? Ryan was probably too busy updating his LinkedIn headline to notice the ground shifting under his feet. I imagined him pacing the conference room, slick smile, hands cutting through air like a motivational speaker, bragging about innovation while the legal scaffolding holding up his career quietly evaporated. Later that day, I began receiving LinkedIn pings from former coworkers. "Hey, what happened? Ryan said you resigned." Sure he did. Ryan could gaslight a smoke alarm. I didn't answer. Not yet. Let them feel it, the creeping itch that something fundamental had gone missing. That wasn't paranoia. That was ownership changing hands. That was the algorithm whispering through their system. I don't belong to you anymore. It started with an intern. Of course it did. There's always one overachieving summer recruit in every legal department. The kind who highlights documents in 3 colors and treats cross-referencing as a moral duty. His name was Ethan, or maybe Aiden, it doesn't matter. His job was to monitor the USPTO database for competitor filings. Routine work. Click, scroll, flag anything suspicious. But then he typed in Novacore's own patent numbers and froze. On his screen, inventor and owner, Olivia L. Grant. Effective date, 24 hours after my termination. He probably thought it was a glitch. Refreshed the page. Cleared cache. Checked again. Still me. Panic must have crept in, the kind you can feel in your teeth. He sent an email to his supervisor with the subject line, possible issue, which in corporate dialect means, please don't fire me for this discovery. His supervisor, Lynn, the junior counsel, opened the link, frowned, cross-checked the filings, and then walked straight to the general counsel's office. Within an hour, legal had pulled the original contract from archives and found it. The clause. The one everyone had forgotten existed. The one I'd buried under layers of harmless legal language back in 2008, when everyone assumed the quiet engineer was just grateful to be there. It was airtight. They couldn't revoke it, couldn't amend it, couldn't even contest it without acknowledging the oversight in court, which would tank their valuation before they could blink. Meanwhile, Ryan was upstairs kicking off a product strategy meeting, his favorite circus. From what I later heard, he strutted around like a game show host, tossing out buzzwords, agile pivots, cross-platform synergy, Q4 domination. He told the board that the new next-gen system would redefine infrastructure analytics. Every module, every algorithmic layer in that revolutionary platform ran on my code, and not a soul in the room knew they no longer had the legal right to use it. Legal sent the memo up the chain. 3 pages of disaster, stamped low visibility, meaning hide this from the board. Recommendation: postpone public demo until IP ownership clarified. Translation: stop before we commit willful infringement. Ryan's response? Laughter. Probably a clerical error, he said. Clerical error, as if the federal government just accidentally transferred $500 million worth of intellectual property to the woman he fired. He told legal to keep quiet until after the demo. Said they'd sort it out post-launch. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. By that afternoon, NextGen's launch was less than 72 hours away. Marketing was printing banners that read proprietary AI architecture. Engineering was pushing final builds. Every single bit of it now belonged to me. I could have stopped them. I could have warned someone, spared them the public humiliation. But mercy wasn't part of my job description anymore. Late that evening, a friend in the legal team forwarded me the internal memo. Subject line: Patent reversion. Urgent. The last line made me smile. Potential exposure. Catastrophic. I poured a glass of wine and reread the sentence until it felt like a lullaby. Across the river, the Novacore tower gleamed with corporate confidence. Every window lit up like nothing could touch them. Inside, Ryan was probably practicing his demo speech in front of a mirror, reciting words like ownership and innovation while standing on ground that legally belonged to me. By midnight, panic had begun to ripple through the building. Whispers in Slack channels, late-night calls between legal and HR, fragments of disbelief. Is this real? Can she actually own it? Who signed that clause? Nobody knew. Nobody wanted to admit they'd never even checked. And there I was, barefoot in my living room, cat on my lap, watching the skyline flicker. 25 years of loyalty had been erased with one meeting. But I'd erased their security with one signature. The scales were balanced. Tomorrow would be louder. The intern's discovery was only the first crack. The real quake was still coming. The call came at 6:14 a.m., just as I was spooning coffee grounds into the filter. The name flashing on my screen made my pulse jump. Harold Brennan, the founder. The ghost who'd built Novacore from a garage startup into an empire, then disappeared into retirement somewhere in Vermont. I hadn't heard his voice in nearly a decade. "Olivia?" he said, his tone equal parts gravel and thunder. "I just got an alert from the USPTO. It lists you as the owner of the core system. Tell me this is a mistake." I took a slow sip of coffee. "It's not. You assigned that IP to the company," he argued. "No," I said quietly. "I never did. You told me we'd finalize the transfer after Series A. Legal got reshuffled. It slipped through the cracks." There was a pause. A long, pained exhale. My God, the reversion clause? "Triggered the moment HR filed my termination," I replied. "You trusted the wrong people, Hal." Silence stretched between us, heavy and electric. "Finally," he said, "I trusted the company would treat you better." Then, the line went dead. 10 minutes later, he was seen storming into Novacore HQ. I got the updates in real time from 3 different former colleagues, people who still respected the woman who'd built their backbone system. Hal didn't come quietly. He marched straight through the lobby, patent printout in hand, and went directly to legal. Witnesses said he stood there like a thundercloud and asked one question. "Did we ever finalize the IP transfer for Grant's algorithm?" When the answer came back, incomplete, he closed his eyes, muttered "Jesus Christ," and headed straight for Ryan's office. By then, the hallways were already emptying, staff pretending to take early coffee breaks to avoid being in the blast radius. Ryan, naturally, tried to charm his way through it. He greeted Hal with that same glossy smile he used for investors. "Hal! Didn't expect—" "Sit down," Hal barked, slamming the patent onto the glass table. "You fired the architect of our entire product line without securing the legal rights to her work." Ryan blinked. "We're on track. It's just a misunderstanding." "She owns the code, Ryan." Hal's voice boomed, echoing through the corridor. "You gave her back the oxygen we breathe." The admin staff outside reportedly froze mid-typing. Ryan fumbled for words. "This isn't permanent. We'll negotiate. Offer her equity." "You think this is about money?" Hal snapped. "You think this is about compensation? You fired the one person who was this company." The silence that followed was radioactive. HR peeked around corners. Legal stared at their shoes. By noon, everyone in that building knew. The patent at the core of Novacore's billion-dollar valuation was gone. Later that day, Hal called an emergency board meeting under the euphemism of strategic review. Translation: disaster control. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. Word spreads fast in the corridors of panic. The boardroom that afternoon was smaller than you'd imagine for a billion-dollar meltdown. 12 seats, frosted glass, recycled air. The general counsel stood at the head of the table with a single sheet of paper. "Per Section 9, Subclause D," she read, "upon involuntary termination without cause, full ownership rights revert to the original filer within 24 hours of notice." She looked up. That notice was filed at 4:02 p.m. Monday. The reversion was processed Tuesday at 4:07. She placed the page down. "Ownership now resides solely with Olivia Grant." Ryan tried to laugh. "Let's not dramatize." She was disengaged, resistant to modern practices. Hal cut him off. "You fired the woman who built your empire and didn't even check who owned the blueprints." The CFO rubbed his temples. The marketing VP looked like she was about to faint. The GC's voice dropped to a whisper. Without her voluntary return of rights, we can't demo, ship, or even maintain production legally. It was over, and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my porch miles away, bourbon in hand, watching the sunlight slide across my fence. My phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from legal, from HR, from Ryan himself. I didn't answer. Let them taste the silence they'd once given me. The storm had only begun, and I wasn't stepping outside until the thunder was mine. Demo day arrived like a storm front, polished, rehearsed, and doomed. Novacore's downtown auditorium gleamed under cold LED lights, the company's logo looping across a 30-foot screen while guests filed in. Investors, journalists, federal partners, all expecting innovation on display. The air hummed with false confidence. Backstage, Ryan adjusted his navy suit and smirked into the mirror. To him, this was his coronation. He'd even practiced the phrase game-changing ecosystem until it rolled off his tongue like champagne. The intro video played. Robots, city skylines, smiling employees pretending their stock options were worth something. Then Ryan walked out, voice smooth and sugary. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to see is the future of adaptive infrastructure, our proprietary next-gen platform. He gestured toward the massive screen behind him as the product interface loaded. Familiar. Too familiar. My code, my logic, my design. Stolen and dressed in new colors. He continued. Developed right here at Novacore by our brilliant team. That's when legal moved. A tall, gray-haired woman in a charcoal blazer stepped out from the wings. She didn't panic. She simply leaned toward Ryan's mic and said quietly, but clearly enough for the first 2 rows to hear. We can't demo that system. Ryan blinked, confused, half smiling. Excuse me? We don't own the patent anymore, she whispered. The microphone caught it. The words echoed through the hall like a dropped glass. Ryan froze, laughed nervously, and turned back to the audience. Minor technical hiccup, he stammered. Just a moment. He stepped aside, still wired into the live mic, and hissed to legal. What are you talking about? We've always owned it. No, Ryan, she said flatly. You never did. The reversion is active. Olivia Grant owns the IP. If we demo this, it's willful infringement. The blood drained from his face. In the crowd, phones lit up as investors began to check the USPTO database. Within minutes, they all saw it. Patent number 79,864,322. Owner, Olivia L. Grant. Date of reversion, 3 days ago. The demo feed froze mid-animation. No one applauded. They just watched the silence stretch until it became unbearable. From the back of the room, Harold Brennan stood. No words, just the weight of a founder's fury. Ryan cleared his throat. It appears we'll need to postpone our demonstration pending verification. The sentence dissolved into air. In that moment, every person in the audience realized what had happened. Their crown jewel, the system they'd invested millions into, didn't belong to Novacore at all. It belonged to the woman they'd fired. Someone printed the USPTO listing right there on site and began handing copies down the rows. Public record, one investor said coldly. We all have it now. The demo ended not with applause, but with the sound of chairs scraping as people left. Ryan stood alone on stage, blinking under the spotlight, while his CTO whispered something that sounded a lot like, "We're done." An hour later, the board convened again. Same glass room, same exhaustion. The general counsel summarized the disaster. As of this morning, any continued use or display of the next-gen system constitutes willful infringement. The CFO spoke without looking up. How much are we exposed for? Hundreds of millions. the GC answered. Hal didn't yell. He just stared at Ryan and said quietly, "You didn't fire an employee, son. You evicted the architect. I wasn't in that room. I didn't need to be. I was at home, watching the live stream replay muted on my laptop, bourbon sweating beside me. My cat, Figaro, dozed across the keyboard like nothing historic had just happened. The messages kept coming. Marcy from engineering. Holy shit, you weren't bluffing? Another from HR. Can we talk? Ryan called 6 times. I ignored them all. I had no interest in salvaging their pride. They'd built their fortune on my foundation, and now that foundation was mine again. The next morning, I woke to sunlight slicing through the blinds and the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly. Emails, voicemails, notifications stacked like dominoes. 247 missed calls. Headlines already spinning. Novacore's $550 million patent reverts to former engineer. The empire had fallen overnight, and I was the quiet gravity that pulled it down. The phone was still buzzing when I finally rolled over and grabbed it. The screen was a battlefield of panic. Emails from legal, texts from old coworkers, one message from Marcy that just said, "They're losing their minds." But the one that caught my eye came from Hal Brennan. Just 2 words. "Call me." I didn't hesitate. He picked up on the first ring. No greeting, no preamble. Just raw disbelief in his voice. "Why does the USPTO list you as the owner, Olivia?" I stretched on the couch, half wrapped in a blanket, Figaro purring by my knees. "Because it always did," I said evenly. "I just let you use it." The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was comprehension. Hal wasn't a fool. He knew there was no walking this back. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted from anger to something close to awe. "What do you want?" Not, "Can we fix this?" Not, "I'm sorry." Just the right question. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood, padded barefoot to my desk, and opened a fresh email draft. Subject line, terms. Inside, I listed them like surgical steps. Full buyout rights for Novacore Technologies to relicense patent number 79,764,322. 8-figure royalty agreement retroactive to the date of termination. A permanent seat on the board of directors with voting privileges, non-negotiable. I ended it with one sentence. This is not revenge. This is realignment. Then I hit send. No signature, no warmth, just the truth. For 3 hours, there was nothing but quiet. I drank coffee, read the news, ignored the incoming flood of damage control emails. By noon, a reply landed in my inbox. "We accept your terms. No bargaining. No delay. Just surrender." They'd done the math and realized fighting me would cost more than rebuilding from scratch. I let them wait another hour before responding. When I finally did, it was one line. "I'll need a new badge. And please return my old nameplate. It's in Ryan's desk drawer, second one down." I could almost feel the ripple of humiliation spread across their executive floor. By evening, formal contracts began pouring into my inbox. Drafts from outside counsel, licensing addendums, non-disclosure updates, all worded like apologies pretending to be legalese. The chairwoman of the board even sent a personal message. "We deeply regret the oversight and value your continued partnership." Partnership. The same word they'd avoided for 25 years. When the final digital signatures were done, I closed my laptop and leaned back, the silence that filled the room, not empty, but earned. The same stillness I'd felt the moment Ryan handed me that termination folder had come full circle. Only this time, it wasn't loss. It was ownership. I didn't need applause. I didn't need to post some self-congratulatory essay about resilience or female empowerment. I had something better. Leverage, equity, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing my name was carved into federal record in the one place corporate ego couldn't erase it. A week later, Novacore issued a press release. They spun it, of course, called it a strategic realignment and a renewed partnership with founding engineer Olivia Grant. Not a single mention of firing me, but the investors knew. The employees knew. The industry knew. And so did Ryan. He resigned 2 days later. The memo said to pursue other opportunities. Translation: he'd burned the one bridge that mattered. Hal sent me a short handwritten note by courier. 5 sentences of respect that ended with, "You reminded us who built this place." I pinned it above my desk, not as a trophy, but as a compass. Some people build companies. Some build legacies. I'd done both, quietly. That night, I poured a double bourbon and sat by the window, the city lights flickering like distant servers rebooting after a crash. I thought about the years I'd given to NovaCore, the nights I'd spent debugging code while executives slept, the loyalty I'd confused for safety. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. When I finally turned off the lamp, Figaro stretched beside me, unimpressed as ever. The world could talk about revenge all it wanted. I preferred accuracy. It wasn't revenge, it was correction. Because when you fire the architect, you'd better check who owns the blueprints, because some of us don't burn bridges. We build new cities, and we charge rent.